to his very famous family. The Daily Beast reports that this is a win for Prince William, as Prince Andrew will never be photographed alongside Prince William again, they said.
In the grand halls of Buckingham Palace, whispers have once again turned into thunder. A new and heartbreaking chapter is unfolding in the life of Prince Andrew, one that even the royal family couldn't prepare for. Once hailed as the Queen's favorite son, Andrew's name was once synonymous with privilege, power, and royal dignity. But today, those golden years feel like a distant memory. His fall from grace has been brutal, and the latest news surrounding him has left not only the public but even members of his own family in disbelief. Sources close to the palace claim that Prince Andrew is facing one of the most devastating moments of his life, an emotional and personal crisis that has reportedly brought him to tears. For months, he's been living in quiet isolation, stripped of his military titles, royal duties, and the respect that once defined his place in history. But now, something even more tragic has emerged, something that may change how the world views him forever. What could have possibly pushed the Duke of York to this breaking point? Has the royal family completely turned their backs on him? Or is there more to this heartbreaking story than what the headlines reveal? As the walls of Windsor Castle close in, and as former allies step away, one thing has become painfully clear. The truth behind this recent heartbreak goes far beyond scandal. It's a story of regret, rejection, and a man desperately clinging to the last fragments of his royal identity. There was a time when Prince Andrew was considered one of the most promising figures of the British royal family. As the third child of Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip, his early years were marked by charm, confidence, and charisma. He was the daring royal, a decorated naval officer who fought in the Falklands War, earning respect from his peers and pride from his mother. The media adored him, the public admired him, and his future seemed unshakably bright. But behind the polished royal image, trouble was quietly brewing. The first signs of a downward spiral began as the years of privilege turned into decades of scrutiny. When Prince Andrew's friendship with controversial figures came to light, the damage was immediate and irreversible. What once was whispered in private corridors exploded into global headlines. The royal who once represented the family's honor was suddenly the face of one of its greatest modern scandals. It wasn't just about bad company. It was about choices, consequences, and the world's changing perception of accountability. As accusations began to surface, the British monarchy found itself at a crossroads. Public trust wavered, critics grew louder, and the once respected Duke of York became a symbol of royal controversy. In the heart of Buckingham Palace, decisions were made that would forever alter his life. Queen Elizabeth II, who had long stood by her son, faced a choice between her personal love and her duty to the crown. In the end, royal duty prevailed. Prince Andrew was stripped of his military affiliations and royal patronages, an act that felt like a final blow to his identity. For Andrew, the reality of exile was unbearable. Once accustomed to the grandeur of royal engagements, he was now confined to a quiet and lonely life within the walls of Royal Lodge in Windsor. The cameras that once celebrated him now sought his downfall. His name became synonymous with disgrace, and even within palace circles, the tone shifted from sympathy to silence. Friends who had once filled his lavish dinner parties stopped answering his calls. Charities removed his name from their lists. The world that once revolved around him had moved on, leaving behind a man struggling to understand how everything had collapsed so quickly. For Andrew, it wasn't only a fall from grace, it was a fall from relevance. Behind closed doors, those close to him say he became withdrawn, spending long hours reflecting on what went wrong. His daughters, Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie, remained his only sources of comfort. But even their loyalty could not protect him from the truth, that his name had become a burden they had to quietly carry. As the monarchy continued to modernize under King Charles III, there seemed to be no room left for Prince Andrew. His efforts to rehabilitate his image failed repeatedly, and each public appearance only fueled more criticism. The royal family's silence spoke volumes, and the distance between Andrew and his siblings grew wider with each passing month. Now, Years after his public disgrace, Prince Andrew faces a new heartbreak, one that cuts deeper than titles or reputation. It is the realization that redemption may no longer be possible, and that the family he once proudly represented might never fully accept him again. When Queen Elizabeth II passed away, Prince Andrew lost not only his beloved mother but also his last true protector within the monarchy. Her steady hand and quiet affection had shielded him from complete exile, even as public opinion turned hostile. But after her death, the atmosphere inside the royal circle shifted dramatically. King Charles III, now the reigning monarch, was determined to protect the future of the crown, even if it meant cutting off his own brother. In the weeks following the Queen's funeral, discussions about Prince Andrew's role were reportedly intense and emotional. Charles, aware of the fragile state of the monarchy's reputation, knew he couldn't allow further damage. Advisors urged him to draw a firm line, to distance the institution from Andrew once and for all. It wasn't a decision made out of cruelty, but rather out of duty, a king's responsibility to preserve the stability of the throne. Yet, to Andrew, it felt like a betrayal. Sources close to the palace revealed that a quiet but painful conversation took place between the two brothers. Andrew pleaded for understanding, insisting that he had already paid a heavy price. He wanted to return to public life, to reclaim at least a small portion of the respect he had lost. But Charles, firm and unwavering, refused. He made it clear that there was no path back. "The monarchy must move forward," he reportedly said, words that struck Andrew harder than any headline ever could. From that moment, Prince Andrew's position within the royal family became little more than symbolic. He was no longer invited to key royal events, and his appearances were deliberately minimized. Even during public gatherings, his presence felt like an uncomfortable reminder of the family's recent turmoil. Behind palace walls, Andrew's isolation deepened. He spent most of his days at the Royal Lodge in Windsor, away from the spotlight that once defined his life. Neighbors described him as a man trapped in a cycle of reflection and regret, occasionally seen walking the grounds alone, head bowed, avoiding attention. His relationship with King Charles grew increasingly strained. While the two still shared familial bonds, the warmth once seen between them had faded into cold formality. Charles was focused on reshaping the monarchy for a modern age, one centered around duty, transparency, and a cleaner public image. In this vision, there was simply no room for the Duke of York. This royal distance didn't go unnoticed by the public. Many sympathized with Andrew's emotional struggles, seeing a broken man beneath the scandal. Others viewed it as a long overdue reckoning, the inevitable result of choices made in arrogance. But for Andrew, the emotional toll was undeniable. Those close to him described nights of sleepless worry and moments where he quietly broke down, mourning not only his reputation but the sense of belonging he once took for granted. Adding to his heartbreak was the growing financial strain. With royal support diminished and his own income sources limited, Andrew began facing the harsh realities of maintaining his vast estate without the privileges of royal funding. It was a life far removed from the luxury he once knew, and while the king's decision may have been politically wise, it left Andrew emotionally shattered. The brotherly bond that had once seemed unbreakable now felt irreparably fractured. For the first time in his life, Prince Andrew stood completely alone, not as a royal, not as a public figure, but as a man stripped of everything that once gave his life meaning. What came next would only deepen his sorrow, pushing him further into the shadows of royal history. Inside the sprawling grounds of Windsor, where once the sound of laughter and royal gatherings filled the halls, there now lingers an echo of silence. Prince Andrew's life, once bursting with energy, protocol, and prestige, has turned into a quiet existence marked by reflection and solitude. The Royal Lodge, his longtime residence, has become more of a refuge than a home, shielding him from the unforgiving glare of the public eye. But even behind its closed doors, peace remains elusive. Those close to the Duke describe a man living in a constant battle between hope and despair. Most days begin with routine, reading the morning papers, walking the gardens, and making the occasional call to his daughters. Yet every page of the news reminds him of what he's lost: his honor, his position, and the life he once proudly represented. The world that once celebrated him now treats him as a relic of controversy, and that realization cuts deeper than any public statement could. While Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie continue to visit him, their concern grows heavier with each visit. They try to lift his spirits, bringing their children along to fill the house with laughter, but Andrew's eyes often reveal a deep sadness he can't conceal. The Duke has always been a devoted father, and it's in these quiet moments with his family that he feels some sense of comfort. Yet, the knowledge that his daughters have to navigate life under the shadow of his past fills him with guilt. Within the royal circle, Prince Andrew's name is rarely spoken aloud. Invitations to major family events have become scarce. And when he does appear, the distance between him and other senior royals is hard to ignore. Once he would have stood proudly beside his siblings at the balcony of Buckingham Palace. Now, his appearances are limited, carefully controlled, and often criticized. Even at King Charles's coronation, his presence was described as uncomfortable. For the Duke, the humiliation was undeniable, a silent reminder that he no longer belonged to the royal spotlight. As the months pass, Andrew's sense of isolation deepens. He spends hours going through old photos, images of happier times when duty and pride defined his days. The military uniforms, the royal tours, the handshakes with world leaders, all memories of a life now gone. Every framed picture serves as both a comfort and a torment, a window into a world that will never return. But what weighs heaviest on him is not the loss of titles or prestige. It's the absence of forgiveness. Though he's maintained his innocence, he knows that public trust has evaporated. In private, he reportedly confided to friends that he feels like a ghost within his own family, unseen, unheard, and unneeded. The burden of disgrace has left him emotionally exhausted, and while he continues to live in Windsor's grand estate, it's a hollow luxury compared to the warmth of acceptance he once enjoyed. Even the staff who remain with him notice the change. The Duke, who once greeted them with cheerful words, now moves quietly through the halls, his energy dimmed. The few remaining friends who visit describe him as polite but detached. A man trying to come to terms with a life that no longer feels his own. And though he hopes for a chance to rebuild his public image, the royal institution seems unwilling to extend that grace. The monarchy has moved forward, reshaping itself under King Charles's leadership and preparing for a new generation led by Prince William and Princess Catherine. In that future, there appears to be no place for the disgraced Duke. In the lonely silence of Windsor, Prince Andrew is left to confront the haunting truth that while walls can protect him from the outside world, they cannot silence the regret that echoes within. The news that shattered what remained of Prince Andrew's fragile world came quietly, almost without warning. Reports began to circulate that King Charles had made a final, irreversible decision, one that would effectively end any remaining hopes Andrew had of returning to royal life. For years, the disgraced Duke had clung to the belief that time might soften his brother's stance, that forgiveness might one day open the doors of redemption. But now it was clear the king's decision was final. According to palace insiders, King Charles informed Andrew privately that he would soon have to vacate the royal lodge, the home that had been his sanctuary for decades. The decision, though framed as a practical matter, was in truth a symbolic severing of ties. The message was unmistakable. The era of protection and leniency was over. For Andrew, it felt like the last piece of his royal identity being stripped away. Those who witnessed the moment say he was visibly shaken. After the meeting, he reportedly spent hours alone, refusing calls and declining to see anyone, even his daughters. To lose the home where he had built so many memories, where his mother had often visited him, was devastating. It wasn't just a matter of walls and windows. It was the loss of his final connection to the life he once knew. The following days were filled with quiet heartbreak. While the royal family continued their official duties, Catherine and William smiling at charity events, Charles attending state functions, Andrew's world grew smaller. His absence from public life, once merely strategic, now felt permanent. The man who had once stood at the heart of royal ceremonies was now reduced to a silent observer of a world that had moved on without him. Friends close to him revealed that he broke down in tears after learning the full extent of his brother's decision. The weight of years of disgrace, isolation, and rejection had finally reached its breaking point. For Andrew, this wasn't just about losing property or privilege, it was about losing belonging. The monarchy had been his entire identity, and without it, he was left adrift, unsure of who he was anymore. Even Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie, though heartbroken for their father, understood that there was little they could do. The royal institution was bigger than one man's sorrow. They offered comfort, but Andrew's despair ran deeper than words could heal. His daughters became his only anchor, reminders that despite everything, some bonds remained unbroken. Meanwhile, public reaction to the king's decision was divided. Some praised Charles for taking a firm stance and prioritizing the monarchy's integrity. Others viewed it as unnecessarily harsh, a cruel punishment for a man already living in exile. But within palace walls, no debate could change what had been set in motion. King Charles believed this was the only way to protect the future of the crown, even if it meant breaking his brother's heart. As the days turned into weeks, Windsor grew quieter than ever. Staff began to prepare for Andrew's eventual departure, sorting through years of personal belongings and private memories. Each box packed was another reminder that his time there was nearing its end. Those who saw him said he appeared lost in thought, often gazing out the window toward the distant towers of Windsor Castle, the same towers beneath which he once walked as a prince of high esteem. In the end, there were no dramatic farewells, no grand statements. Just silence, the kind that follows when everything meaningful has already been said. For Prince Andrew, it was a painful acceptance of a truth he could no longer escape. His royal chapter had closed forever, and as news of his emotional breakdown spread, one haunting image lingered: the fallen prince, alone at the royal lodge, quietly wiping away tears for the brother who had chosen the crown over him, and for a life that, no matter how much he longed for it, would never return.